Audio.
Testing 1, 2. Did it work? Got to remember how to do this stupid thing.
Councillor Mattis, I made you a co-host, so you should be able to see if someone's raised their hand or wanting to speak.
I only have 4 people on my
Oh, I
screen.
can't. Oh, sorry, I got to turn my volume up. There we go. I should be able to hear you now.
That's fine. I only have 4 people on my screen. I have myself, Jim Zaffino, Rick Michelle, and Mayor Johansson. So I don't know, because you're screen sharing, it takes away everybody else.
Oh, okay. Well, I can watch for you, but we also have Councillor Grace and the mayor, Sean Goodsell, Randy, Ed Chow, and we have our Kelly Garcia from Okanagan Basin Water Board, Councillor Ventimiglia now, Water Councillor Sadhu.
Now, the other option is if you don't screen share, I can probably see everybody until we
Okay.
need to screen share.
Sure, I can stop that for now, you bet. And then I could just put it back up.
Yeah, when you need to, you bring it on board.
Yeah.
Councillor Mattis, just for your reference, I don't know if you want to be able to see everybody to be able to see if people have hands, but if you look up and you hit at the very top of your iPad where it says participants and there's 14, you'll see everybody's name. And if somebody puts their electronic hand up, it'll show there. And you can always see that even if she's screen sharing instead of scrolling.
Yeah, how do you make that stay in view all the time? Because for me, it's there for 10 seconds and then it disappears.
Yeah, you have to kind of just check it out every minute or so.
Yeah, Diane will just screen share when she needs to. Well, I see it's 5:01 and I believe we have a quorum, so I will call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for January 10th, 2022. Are there any late items for our agenda?
No, there is no late items. Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
very much. Hearing that, I would take a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Councillor Mattis, I've modified the motion to say that the agenda be adopted as amended by moving G1 to water matters and reordering the remaining items under business. That was just to
Okay.
move the council remuneration report to water matters.
Yeah, that agenda was circulated, I believe, and
Yes.
updated, so it would be circulated.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Adoption of the prior minutes, motion to adopt the minutes of December 13th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting.
So moved.
Councillor Ventimiglia and Councillor Grice, thank you. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. business arising out of prior minutes, there is none. We'll move right into delegations and petitions. We have two this evening or this afternoon. The first one, I will turn over the floor to Jim Zaffino, the RDOS Manager of Finance, who's going to give us a presentation on noxious weeds and nuisance control. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. So Diane, is this going to be shown as I speak?
No, you can. Do you want to upload it or do you want me to upload it?
I did send it to you, but I can do a screen share.
Yeah, you can do a screen share. I gave you the ability to do that.
Okay, then I will.
think you have, yeah. Let me
It
know
says
if
here,
it doesn't work.
Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, I will make a co-host.
Good.
Okay,
Try again.
thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna have to take one off. Okay, can you see this?
Don't see it yet.
Okay, because I've got it up.
Okay. I can go and grab it, Jim.
Maybe you can grab, yeah, I'll keep trying, but I do have it up.
Okay.
While you're doing that, I can just start my preamble. Mayor, council staff, my name is Jim Zaffino. As stated, I am the manager of finance for the regional district of Okanagan Similkameen. I'm here to talk about two of the 156 services that we have. These two services are the noxious weed control, also known as invasive weeds, and nuisance control. I'm here. The reason I am here, and I'll discuss it further in the PowerPoint, is that we're looking at increasing the bylaw tax limit, and under Section 346 of the Local Government Act, it does require that that participating municipalities give consent, and that's what I'm here for. It's the service has been going on well beyond the 5 years, and essentially the cost of living has creeping up, the cost of the expenses are creeping up, and that's the reason why we're looking for the increase. I'm here more for the finance side. Unfortunately, COVID's got us, and the engineering can't be here. But I'll start with the PowerPoint. And Diane, can you go to the next slide? Or do I just do this? Oh, I can't. Okay, so the objective of noxious weed control, I thought maybe I'd just give a brief description of the two services. So all matters related to the eradication and management of the invasive weeds. As you can see, we look at the removal of the weeds. We encourage, facilitate an agency cooperation, interagency cooperation. Education and public relations is also part of it. Majority of the budget does go to Okanagan Similkameen invasive species. And we also conduct work in any part of the RDOS depending on where the invasive weed issues are. And it's also complaint driven. Next, Diane. So you can see the tax requisition limits creeped up from 2001 to 2022. The 22 one is what we're asking for now. Basic increases to program cost over the 10 years. Growing list of invasive species. So I did talk to the engineering department that works on this, and it's not the same weeds. It's the same plus new weeds coming in, and it's important that we keep up with them. Next, please. So the other one, bylaw is the objective for the nuisance control, and essentially it's starling control program administered by the BC Grape Growers Association. So that's where the majority of the budget goes. So they're professional trappers using ethical and humane practices. So carry out the trapping throughout the region, considered to be pests for the berries, tree fruit, and vineyard operation, as well as livestock farming. Flocks can destroy and have destroyed berries, grapes, and tree crops. Will also eat livestock feed, leave droppings, and cause disease in the animals. Next. And here is the tax requisitions for 2003-11 and what is being proposed, recommended for 2022. The basic inflation increase to maintain the program at a level where it is useful. Next. Okay, with except of water, sewer, and electrical utilities, majority of local government services are taxed on property assessment, and this is no different. Both the noxious weeds and nuisance control services are regional services, and it is participating with municipalities and electoral areas. Looking at the 2022 tax requisition, the town of Oliver is paying 4.9% of the expenses, and that's based on the total assessments. And next. So this is my part of it also. So this is, I thought maybe the council would be interested in seeing what the costs are. Something new I introduced for the regional district is doing a cost per capita. The bottom in the number in the circle is what it is now. The top one, it would be if the tax requisition increases and the bylaw is passed. So that is per capita. I thought maybe it might be more useful in just looking at the tax assessment based on assessment, because the more population you have, the more assessment you have, the more you pay, but also the more benefit the taxpayers and the clients of the Okanagan benefit. So next one, please. So with the new proposed recommended tax requisition, the top number is what it would be. And if you see for Oliver, it'd be 1,564. As it is now, if it doesn't change, it's $1,293. So that's the change for, and we're talking about nuisance control right now. And I also thought you might be interested in seeing what everybody else pays. And as far as the 2022 budget, you're going to be seeing the same type of information when I do present the 2022 regional district budget to the town of Oliver and all the other municipalities and electoral areas. Next, Diane. And this is just a cost, something that I've also started to do for regional districts, so as I used to do for municipalities, is a cost per household based on property values going from 500,000 to $1 million. And anyone that has a property value that's in between can extrapolate the number. So that will be, the bottom number is the current, and the top number will be what it will be based on the assessments. And this again is a nuisance control. I also have the same thing for the noxious weeds. So if you could go to the next one, Diane. Same thing here. You see the cost per capita. The higher number would be what it would be if the bylaws passed. The lower number is what it is now. And again, it's beneficial just to see how all the other municipalities compare to yours. Next, please. And these are the tax requisitions. Again, you see the tax requisition going for Oliver $3,043 to $3,440. And again, just restate that it's just maintained the same service level as we've had in the past. And last one, I believe. Next. And again, same thing with various property values. People can extrapolate if no one house is exactly 500, 600, etc. However, they can extrapolate to see what the differences are. This is one of many services, and when I do present the 2022 regional district budget, you'll be able to see the same thing, except that it's for the whole tax requisition for the regional district. And finally, questions. I'm here to answer any questions that I can. This isn't the first time I've done this. I've done it with other municipalities, but what I did say to Penticton, for instance, is that if you have any technical questions, all I know about weeds is how to pull them out by hand. But if you have any questions on the finance side, I'm here.
I don't see any hands raised at this point, Jim. I certainly want to thank you for your presentation first and foremost. My questions would be in terms of the birds, for example. The benefit is to the farmers,
yes,
as opposed to the people living in town. Yet we pay more than they do towards the program. And I know we're always asked to think regionally and not locally, but I don't sit on the board, so I'm thinking from a council perspective and for the taxpayers of the town. Is there any way within the structure to set it up so that those that benefit from the programs pay for the programs?
It would change, it would require a major change. What you were talking about, it would be something like the, just trying to figure out if there's something like that. It would be, the SIR program has something similar like that, but it's a lot of administration and a lot of change that would be required. So it's not just simple pushing a button and doing it. So, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of services where one sector benefits over the other. And this is just one of those things like that. For instance, school tax, which regional districts don't tax, but there's a lot of individuals who pay tax and who don't have kids going to school. But it's more of a social thing than anything else.
Yeah, that I certainly understand. Second question is at the end of the year, is there any type of reporting as to the success levels of these programs? Like how many 100 pounds of weeds did they pull by hand?
Well,
how many birds did they eliminate?
The engineering department would have a record of what they did, yes. And
okay.
I can pass that on when she comes back.
Okay. Certainly answers my questions. And I don't see any hands on the floor. So I would thank you very much for your presentation, Jim.
Thank you for having me.
Valuable information. I know it's not an expensive program, but it is a valuable program.
Thank you.
And okay. Moving on to the next presentation, I don't see her on the screen anywhere, but I'm going to, oh, there she is now.
I'm here.
Pass it over to Kelly Garcia from the Okanagan Basin Water Board, who has a presentation for us as well.
Thank you very much. Please let me know if you can see my screen okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Source Water Protection Toolkit, a project that was recently completed by the Okanagan Basin Water Board. But first I'll start by just talking about the importance and benefits of source water protection and the challenges we're facing in the Okanagan and beyond in providing safe drinking water. Some of this information might not be new to you, but I just want to provide a general overview at the beginning of the presentation. Then I'll introduce you to the new toolkit that's been completed by the OBWB and many, many other partners that compiles some solutions to these challenges that I'll bring up at the beginning of the presentation. Then at the end, I'll talk a bit about what you can do as elected officials to continue to support source water protection in your communities. So in case you're not familiar with the Okanagan Basin Water Board, we've been around for more than 50 years in the Okanagan Valley, and we focus on projects and programs that benefit the Okanagan watershed as a whole. So our jurisdiction is from, North Armstrong all the way down to Osoyoos. So watershed boundaries define the jurisdiction of the Water Board. So here are our current directors. So we've got 3 directors from each of the regional districts: North Okanagan, Central Okanagan, and Okanagan-Similkameen. And then in addition to those, we have 3 seats. One is filled by somebody from the Okanagan Nation Alliance, and currently that's Chief Chris Derrickson. One is filled from somebody, the director of the Water Supply Association of BC, and that's Rob Carrasco right now. And then that third other chair is the Water Stewardship Council chair. The Water Stewardship Council is a technical advisory body to the Okanagan Basin Water Board, and they've been operating for, I believe, 14 years now. They meet monthly and they discuss current water issues and provide that technical support to the board and the OBWB staff. So source water protection, what it is and why it matters. It's basically the safeguarding of drinking water sources. So those sources could be rivers, streams, lakes, reservoirs, aquifers, groundwater wells. So those sources, but also their contributing areas. So the watersheds of those areas. It's the first barrier, a very important part of the multi-barrier approach that water suppliers use to safeguard public health and protect drinking water. Why do we need it? Obviously. So drinking water sources can be easily contaminated. There are a lot of different uses, land uses going on around those drinking water sources. And if they are contaminated, it can be very difficult, costly, and maybe even impossible in the source of aquifers to remediate those groundwater source or those drinking water sources. The other thing about source water protection that makes it a bit different from the other barriers, such as treatment, is that it can also deliver cumulative socioeconomic benefits and ecological services. That's basically just saying, for example, if you protect a riparian area, you're protecting drinking water, but you're also providing benefits, possibly other benefits like habitat for species, aesthetic benefits for people who like to recreate in that riparian area, hiking and biking trails, that kind of thing. So you have these cumulative benefits through source water protection. So the challenge is we've got multi-use watersheds in the Okanagan. So we've got those that get their water from the upper reservoirs, not Oliver, but other water suppliers in the Okanagan. They've got people recreating there, range, mining, forestry, all sorts of different things going on in the watersheds. In the more urban and rural areas, you've got land development that can result in impermeable surfaces, less infiltration. And then we've got climate change that's enhancing these challenges. So we've got more frequent landslides and erosion, flooding, increased runoff, wildfire, all these different things that are happening and just being enhanced by climate change. And then lastly, we have a really complicated legislative framework in BC. So there are many different agencies involved in regulating water, and sometimes we can have conflicting mandates within provincial authorities and also maybe gaps in authority. So like I mentioned, local governments don't necessarily have control in their source watersheds, particularly in the upland parts of the valley. So on that note, this just shows you the complicated legislative framework. So we've got 23 pieces of legislation in BC that regulates water in one way or another. It's mostly at the provincial level with the Drinking Water Protection Act and Water Sustainability Act, but there are also local government bylaws and federal regulation. And then on top of this, of course, we have unceded rights and title of Indigenous people, the Silk Okanagan people in the valley. So this just shows you the difference between how water moves in an urban environment and a forested environment. So in an urban environment, we've got water moving very quickly when we have storms and picking up contaminants and taking those directly to water sources. Whereas in a more natural forested environment, that's the blue, dark blue peak, we've got a much slower runoff and more stable base flows. So water has time to infiltrate and be naturally cleaned before it reaches its destination, whether that's an aquifer or a stream. And again, just reiterating the fact, because it is so important, how beneficial a natural shoreline is in infiltrating and slowing down water. So in a natural shoreline, you've only got about 10% runoff. In a disturbed shoreline, 55% of that water just runs off straight into the receiving environment without having any chance to naturally clean itself. And just to mention that every elevation layer, meaning all the way up from our mountaintops where we have our reservoirs, down to the valley bottom and the main stem lakes, we've got source water protection issues. So that means that we've also got solutions that everybody can be implementing, whether your source is groundwater in the valley bottom or surface water in the upper watershed. So under the Drinking Water Protection Act, water suppliers are required to have a source protection plan. So this source protection plan involves two pieces: a source water assessment, which I believe the town of Oliver has one of those from 2015, and a response plan, which I'm not sure you have or not. So one of the main reasons why we did this toolkit, one of the reasons was because there was some confusion over what a source protection plan is. A lot of water suppliers had that water assessment completed, as I mentioned, but hadn't moved to that response plan part. And there was a lot of confusion about what Interior Health wanted with that response plan. So that was one of the reasons why this toolkit came about. It was actually a person from Interior Health that came up with this idea for the OBWB to work on this toolkit. And I'll talk about who else was involved in a second here. So other reasons for the toolkit, what it mainly does, like I said, is clarify the source protection planning process, which in the end will save water suppliers time and money because we've done all the research for you and put it in a very nice compiled resource. And we've worked with the regulators to create it. So in the end, it's going to make the regulators happy as well, because they've got more consistent plans coming their way, and they're able to work with the water suppliers on those. It compiles and delivers the latest best practices and case studies. So we have about 35 case studies in there that allow communities to draw on the successes and lessons learned of other communities. It talks a lot about jurisdiction and what local governments or irrigation districts or improvement districts, what is within their jurisdiction when it comes to source water protection. And then we also have some information on how to build awareness and gain support for source water protection. So how do you get folks in the upper watershed that are, driving ATVs and that kind of thing? How do you get them to understand that they are doing this at a drinking water source, and to have respect for that? A lot of text on this slide, but it's just showing you who was involved in this project. So for me, the outcome was a source water protection toolkit, but the process in developing that toolkit was really the most important part. So getting all of these people together in a room, which had ended up being a Zoom room because of COVID, unfortunately, but getting all these folks together to talk about source water protection, identify the issues, talk about solutions and priorities, get the regulators and the health agencies in there, along with the water suppliers and consultants and water experts in the Valley, and talk about these issues and come up with a toolkit. That was the product of this. But really, it was the process, and that process continues even though the toolkit has been completed. And then we hired Lorette Aquatic Consulting to write the toolkit with me, with the Okanagan Basin Water Board. And it was funded by Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Interior Health Authority has contributed a lot of money to this, so they've got a lot invested in it. City of Kelowna, City of West Kelowna, and the Healthy Watersheds Initiative. So I've got to always do a shout out to the funders. This is what the toolkit looks like. And to mention as well that the toolkit is downloadable as a PDF, but we've also created a full website around it. So all of these pieces you see up here have been put into this fully integrated interactive website. And the purpose of that is so that we can keep that as a living document and update it with new case studies. And as regulations change, we can fix up the website rather than having a clunky PDF that we, can't update. So the PDF will do, every 5 years or something as an update, but it's really the website that I think will be the most beneficial part of this. So the toolkit has part one, which is the roadmap to source protection. And this is where we clearly lay out how to do a source protection plan. So what's the assessment part? What is the response plan part? We boil it down to 5 steps. And again, we had the health agencies involved in writing this toolkit. So they provided the advice on this. Part 2 is the tools. And so this talks about, okay, now you have your plan. Here are the tools and approaches that you can use to continue to implement it within your community. And then part 3 is this huge amount of additional info and resources. So on the regulatory framework, economic benefits to source water protection, common threats, and how to overcome them, and then a pile of useful links and that sort of thing. So it's just a really, looks like a lot. We've boiled it down to a very concise document, but it is a lot of information for sure. So the templates is a really important part as well, because this is where I'm talking about getting that consistency in source protection plans. So we've got these outlines that consultants can use when they're preparing the assessments for the communities. And then you can't read this, but this is the actual source protection plan. It's an Excel document. It's a living document that you use, and you work with your technical advisory committee on updating it regularly. You have a staff person who's in charge of it. And this is your plan, your source protection plan. So it's not a document that you write and you stick on a shelf. It's actually a living document. So this just shows in a different way how the sections of the toolkit relate to each other. So again, making it very clear what a source protection plan is under your operating permit, and how you use the tools to carry out that response plan part of it. And I'll draw your attention to this one, because when I talked about the challenges at the beginning, I think you got a good understanding of the complexity of source water protection when you have so many different players involved. So really, the Technical Advisory Committee is a key part of source protection planning, bringing your partners together and collaborating and finding solutions that way. And on that note, the Technical Advisory Committee isn't just sort of this ad hoc committee that you meet with once in a while. You try to make it a formal committee that has the terms of reference and meets annually, and you have kind of the same players. I know there's a lot of turnover in provincial government and what have you, but you try to get people that are invested in it and have accountability and give a long-term commitment. You have regular meetings that are coordinated by the water supplier, and yeah, that's how you get other people to work on what they're supposed to be working on. You know, the province is in charge of source water protection in a lot of ways, and so this is how you bring the partners together into the room. So one last thing is, I mentioned the Okanagan Water Stewardship Council, and they've been working on this the last couple of years, and they're the people who actually wanted this toolkit developed and this process to happen. And these are the actions they recommended that the Okanagan Basin Water Board of Directors and staff work on over the next while. And so these are kind of what's happening at the OBWB level, these actions here. And so what can you do as an elected official? There's a really good primer on drinking water management in general, or as a whole, so not just source water protection. But these are 4 things that come out of that. And basically just understanding why it's important and having a basic knowledge of water quality and quantity, understanding your role as a local government, roles and responsibilities, and why it's essential to engage with other levels of government and stakeholders. And then just to continue to support staff when they're working on source protection initiatives. So if they are working on source protection plans or whatever, just providing support as needed for budgets and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in reading that primer, that's a very good, and along with the toolkit, just 2 really good resources for getting an understanding of source protection. And lastly, we did a webinar series to support the launch of the toolkit. So we had 33 speakers over 9 weeks. We just wrapped it up in December. And we took each tool of the toolkit and just had people come in and talk about real life examples and case studies. So they're recorded and posted at that link there. Thank you very much for listening. That's everything for me tonight.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Very informative presentation. Do we have any questions from council? I'm not seeing any questions, Kelly, so.
Councillor Grace, sorry.
Councillor Grace, there we go. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. I think my question is, and yes, thank you as well, Kelly, for the presentation. I guess my question is more to staff. If this toolkit is already on our radar, do we plan to use the toolkit? And I know Kelly had mentioned she didn't know if we have a response plan, so I'm curious if we do. Probably over to Director of Operations, I would assume. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, the town of Oliver did complete as part of our conditions on permit some of the modules that Kelly was talking about. We haven't implemented everything, so that's something that staff would have to start looking at again, and maybe using some of the tools and looking at some of the recommended actions. And it involves key partners, RDUS, OIB, sometimes Ministry of Highways for doing certain things. We don't have a response plan, no, at this time.
And I'm happy to provide any support that you would like, Sean, or anything that I can do to help. Just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other hands. Are there any other questions? And if there are, just speak up. Okay, I don't hear anyone. Kelly, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay, moving on to water matters. The first item is the mayor and council remuneration and expenses comparison study. There was a report circulated by the corporate officer, and I will turn the floor over to the corporate officer for this.
Thank you very much, Chair Mattis. The purpose of this report is to outline mayor and council's current remuneration and expenses in comparison to like-sized communities. As a little bit of a background, in 2018, local elected officials in BC endorsed a resolution at UBCM to develop a resource guide regarding the development of remuneration packages that are defensible and fair. The guide provides some best practices in addressing remuneration, and they note that it's good to do a review prior to an upcoming election. For 2022 is an election cycle, so hence we're bringing it forward to you today. So for council, all of our council remuneration, a bylaw was developed in 1996, which is our current bylaw. Review was undertaken in 2016, which was internal, with some minor adjustments to accommodate acting mayor compensation. In my report, you'll see there's a small table that shows mayor, councillor, and water councillor remuneration, which started in 1996, and where you are currently in 2021. These rates have been adjusted for CPI. Just as a quick reminder, in 2019, the federal legislation was eliminated the 1/3 tax exemption from provincial and local government elected officials. That was brought forward to council for review. At that time, council chose not to amend the remuneration bylaw to accommodate the tax exemption change. Looking at reports, I noticed that the regional district at that time of the tax legislation change, they did create a committee composed of citizens to look at equalization and remuneration for their own board, and they had not done a review for 10 years. For all of our council, the last comprehensive review or the last bylaw was in 1996, which is 25 years. So a fair amount of time. So through Civic Info, we're able to pull up a spreadsheet that shows like-size municipalities. It's a little bit of a sorting thing. So I've tried to choose municipalities of similar size, and the report shows where Oliver is in the graph for mayor, councillor, and water councillor. Just moving back up to my table. So there is an opportunity for council in the guide from UBCM. Again, you could have local government staff who would internally undertake a review. There are some pros and cons. You could hire a consultant, again, pros and cons, or as the RDOS had done, they formed an independent task force to undertake that. And of course, there's pros and cons with that as well. With the upcoming election, I'm suggesting again that the remuneration bylaw and the travel expense bylaw both be looked at due to their age, and as we're moving forward into the election cycle, and try to have them updated for the newly elected officials that come in late 2022. So I do have a resolution before you, but I can take any questions prior to looking at that resolution that's proposed for council. Thank you.
Thank you. For myself, I think they did a good job 25 years ago. Maybe we do need to make some changes, but I will throw it open to the floor as to for discussion around this. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Chair Mattes. Yeah, I mean, I think if it's been 25 years, it's probably a good time for another review, especially with the new round of councillors coming in and mayor possibly. So sorry, not to say that, anything could happen. Yeah, I think it's always good to review. I like the idea of having a community panel or whatever be in charge of the review. I think the more sort of input we can have from the community, the better. I think it probably will create more trust rather than having it done internally as far as the process goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think I see Councillor Schwarzenberger reaching. Yes, there he is.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I think, 25 years is probably a good time to take a look at it. I would favor the citizen panel looking into this and coming back with a recommendation. Doesn't mean we have to accept their recommendation, but I think it's a good time to take a look at it right now before the upcoming election. Thank you.
I'll jump in one more time while the mayor and Councillor Ventimiglia are composing their thoughts. For myself, we fit into the pack very well in terms of what we're paid today. So I'm not sure that we need to review the bylaw. 25 years ago, they set it up to follow the CPI, which is, to me, has kept us in line with other municipalities. So again, it's certainly something I want staff to review every 4 years or whatever to see if there is a need for change. And at that time, but to me, to tie up staff time, to set up this committee and meet with the committee and come back and say, no, actually, you're in pretty good shape. I would rather see staff working on other projects. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Those are all good points that you make, Councillor Mattis, and since you called myself and the mayor out, I figured I'd put in my 2 cents as well. I tend to agree with Councillor Schwarzenberger and Councillor Grice that it does look like things were done really well and pretty solid plan was put into place 25 years ago, but it's been 25 years. If a review is going to happen, as mentioned in the report, this is the time to set things up for a new incoming council the following year. And we do fit in the middle of the pack. I agree. I think that's probably where we want to be anyway. But it'd be interesting to see what sort of changes have come about in the rest of the communities after that tax change. And yeah, I see a benefit rather than a detraction to doing the review right now with the community panel, as the others recommended.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle. You'll have to unmute, Rick.
I can
There we go.
unmute you. Oh, you're good. Okay.
Good. Yeah, I remember discussing this a few years ago, and I kind of stand by what the decision was made to leave things alone. I think that we're in the middle of the pack. 2, I think we're well paid for what we do. I don't think that there's a need for a change. And just a bit of history. When the water councillor positions were actually created, there was a huge increase in the regular councillor's remuneration. It was actually increased by the same amount that the water councillors got. That just gives you a bit of scope as to how that number came about, because it was just deemed that the regular councillors would go up by the same amount that they were going to pay the water councillors for the additional responsibilities they'd be taking on. So just thought I'd throw that out there. That's how that number came about.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Any other comments? Mayor Johansson, you're on mute, but.
There, I'm off mute. My only question is, I'm just wondering how the independent task force, the members from the community would be established. Because I think that would be pretty important. I do like, if we're going to do this, that we would have somebody that could, would have an overview of other municipalities and provide some expertise there. And I think we could get some good people from the community, but I'm just wondering how we're going to select people from the community that their input would be valuable and they would have a good idea, because some of the cons are pretty, clear: lack of understanding of roles, responsibilities, workload, credibility of committee members, that type of thing. I think I'd want to see some process of how that would be established. I don't think it's a bad idea to have a review, but I want to make sure that if we're going to do a review, we're getting valuable information. We're not just going through the exercise to go through the exercise. Those would be my comments.
Thank you. I believe that corporate officer has an answer for you.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. I would see it as a terms of reference being established for the committee. And I would hope to speak to other municipalities who have done this and take a look at their terms of reference and what types of qualifications that they'd be looking at and how they'd be guided. I would, a lot of it is very financial related. So I would see RCA or CFO playing more of a key role in guiding the independent panel.
Thanks for that. Again, for myself, what I hear is staff time to find out that we're in the middle of the pack and paid reasonably well. But I'll leave it at that. And if we have anything, motion of any sort from the floor, I'd be happy to entertain it. Otherwise, it's been good discussion.
I will make a motion. I'm just looking at the recommendation here, though. So the recommendation is to use the community panel, is that correct?
That's the staff recommendation, yes.
Sorry, I just didn't want to pass this by without knowing that there would be a motion going on the floor here. But yeah, I would move the recommendation. I can read it if you like, but it's lengthy.
No, we'll.
There we go.
Oh, here it comes.
Oh, sorry, I'm on regular. Pardon me. I've already jumped to the next meeting.
I'll be happy to read the motion.
There we go.
The motion is that council directs staff to advertise for 5 Oliver residents that include rural water system users to sit on an independent task force to undertake review of council's remuneration package, and that council directs staff to review Oliver Council Remuneration Bylaw number 861/1997 and bring a draft for consideration, and that council directs staff to review the travel and expense policy bylaw 1304 and bring a draft for consideration. That has been moved.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Ventimiglia. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would call the question. Given the type of meeting we're in, is anyone opposed? I'm opposed. I can't see anyone else's hands or at this point.
Councillor Michelle has got his hands raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say before, I was trying to figure out how to raise that stupid hand, that considering how much is gonna have to go into this, that this is a giant waste of time. I'm definitely opposed to it. Absolute waste of time. I'm opposed.
Hearing no others, the motion passes. Okay, moving on to business H1, investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure Environmental Quality Grant Program. The CAO has a verbal report for us on this.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. We are continuing research for grants, and one of the grants coming to our attention is this environmental grant, invest in Canada infrastructure, have some green component with it. So we explored it with True Engineering, look our capital plan. And so this grant, basically we're looking at one project is to connect 22 users currently is not with the town sewer system, connect them into the town system. And for 1.4 million grant, the project total cost, 70% were paid by the grants. And so the email attached in the project detail the scope of the work and the costing aspect. One thing on the second paragraph, the engineer basically point out, we in our town's road capital plan, it will cost us $600,000 to pave the road. If we successfully get this grant and we can save 70% of it, which paid by the grant, which is $420,000. So at this stage, we just seek council direction whether want staff to put into application of this grant project. Thank you. Sean, you want to speak something on it?
Yes, I can expand on that. Sorry, we had to put this together quickly on Friday, so it was only in the email and tried to get it onto the agenda. So there is 22 properties that were brought into the town back in 2008. They're all on septic systems. So right now everything leaches into the Okanagan River or oxbows. So that's the environmental component. It is in our 5-year sewer capital plan to build some infrastructure, and originally we were going to make a sewer local service area. But if we get this grant, we can attack in a different way. And if we expand, because Sawmill was always on our radar, and it's also in the general budget for resurfacing and upgrading. If we expand it just a bit further, so paving would be involved from basically Similkameen to the edge of town south on to Oak Avenue. So we're combining two projects that are both on our 5-year capital plan, even though they're about 5 years out. But with the money that we could save in the long run, may be something that we could look at. So we wanted to get it on the agenda, see, get council's opinion if we should follow through, because there is a bit of work to put the grant together for our consultants. So we wanted to check with you guys first if we even want to consider that at this point.
Any comments from the floor or questions? Mayor Johansson, you are on mute.
I know, I haven't started talking yet. Trying to work the mouse. I'm just wondering what our portion of the funding would amount to. Do we have enough money in our reserves to cover that, or would be needing to borrow money to be able to provide our 30% to make this project happen?
I don't have, I was trying to get in touch with Alma today. I didn't have a discussion with our CFO at this point yet. I'm assuming that there could be some adjustments to the existing capital plans. I don't know if Alma's on right now or she can help us. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the project schedule here, and I was just wondering if it was that S for your Okanagan to Similkameen, or is it the because you said it's in the 5-year plan, right?
It's 5 years out, and originally I think we had the amount. Alma, Steve just changed it on us. It's called Sawmill Sewer Extension. It was just over $1 million.
Oh, okay.
What Steve found out was there was no contingency built into that, so he had to raise the number up just to make sure. And of course, that's a worst case scenario, being 1.4 million for that.
Well, if we have to bring it forward into into this year, next year, then there's probably another project that's just got to be pushed back a little bit, right? Like,
yeah. And we could discuss that when we're receiving 70% covered. It's something that we could definitely adjust some of the projects. And Alma, the other project, the other portion of the project's under our general budget, and that was again out on 2026, and it was Sawmill Road rehabilitation, Similkameen to Walnut. So there was a portion there.
oh, okay, yeah, I see that.
So those are the two areas that Steve was talking about, what he thought could fit into this grant application and may have a chance. We reviewed many other projects, Steve and I, and they didn't really fit into this particular grant.
Mayor Johansson.
Thanks, Chair. Just as a follow-up, just wondering about the $11,000 per lot. Is it in our bylaws that property owners, if we do a sewer expansion, have to take that amount on, whether or not they connect to the sewer?
I think if you make it a sewer, like a local service area, I believe. What Steve was suggesting was attacking it in a different way, because we're getting most of the projects covered, that once there's septic fields, and I have had some inquiries along there a few years ago, people had to rebuild their septic fields, but there's probably, as people have to rebuild their septic field or do any building permits or something, then we could get them to go onto the system and pay that way. But I don't have the answer to that entirely.
But a local service area, they would have to vote on it, right? And then if over 50% agreed, then it could go through as a local service area. But the other option probably is just paying. If they want to connect, then they pay, right?
Yeah. And that's the approach that Steve was thinking that would work best in this situation. Because it's so expensive just for a minimal amount of users.
Yeah.
And it just another component for council, it does help our sewer lift station on Maple. Right now it's underutilized and it's all industrial. Well, it's more commercial industrial, but getting more residents onto that lift station actually helps the lift station. Doesn't become as stagnant. It pumps more frequently and you have less problems.
Thank you. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the CFO, what is the position in our sewer reserves right now, and are they committed or are they overcommitted for the next 5 years, undercommitted, or how are we sitting?
Yeah, they're not overcommitted. Like Sean was saying, if this project comes forward, then we'll realign what needs to be done. So maybe push a project or two a bit into the future if it's overtaxing the sewer reserve. But it works out in the long run because you've got 70% grant funding, right? So it's worth juggling a few things around.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. I'm wondering just what the deadline is for the grant application and if we'll have some time to take a look at our 5-year plan and see if we should be identifying some projects that could get bumped if we can pull this forward. I think anytime we can get 70% grant funding, that's significant, and it's a good idea to take advantage of that. But I want to make sure that there's nothing that's high priority that's going to get bumped instead. Thank you.
Through the chair, I believe the deadline's on January 26th. We do have one council meeting just prior to that. And then we may need a resolution at that time. And yeah, that would give us some time. And the reason why we came to council though is our consultant said it will take some of his staff time to put the grant together. Some of these grant applications take quite a bit of time to put together. So him not having an answer by, a week or two before may make it tight to make the deadline.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we do have a proposed motion on the board that I would be more than happy to move, that council authorize staff to submit Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure, Environmental Quality Grant Program funding stream to the Government of Canada for the Sawmill Road Sewer Extension and Rehabilitation Project. And that council authorizes the signing authorities to endorse the Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Infrastructure, and Environmental Quality Grant Agreement if the application is successful.
I'll second.
Thank you. So it's been moved and second. Any further discussion? I think anytime we have 70% and juggling things around is something we do every year at budget time anyways. So it won't be a stretch for us to move ahead and give them time on this application. So on that basis, is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes. Moving on to the next item, H2, 2022 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, grant opportunities. The corporate officer's report is attached, and I will hand the floor over to Ms. Vakovich.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. This is for the 2022 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. There are 2 grant opportunities through UBCM. The application deadlines are the end of January and the end of February. I have not had the opportunity to build the application or the spreadsheet, but I've been speaking to emergency support services people and thinking in my head of things that we can apply for our emergency operations center. They're both about building capacity and being able to respond to emergencies. We've been fortunate to use ESS funding through the regional district and have been able to purchase computers and such. But there's some additional things that the volunteers would like to help build their capacity. And for the Emergency Operations Center, communication is lacking in the fire hall, in the upstairs room. So I was looking at moving the wiring. I think there's lines been dropped in the fire hall to their general area. I have them moved to the upstairs so we can, if we have to ramp up, we have access to telephones and that type of thing up there. So the motion before council is to that council authorize staff to submit an application for grant funding through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for Emergency Social Services. The application deadline is January 28th, 2022, and that council authorize staff to submit an application for grant funding through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for Emergency Operations Centers and Training. Application deadline is February 25, 2022. Both of those grant funds are capped at $25,000 each. And I could take any questions if you have them.
Mayor Johansson.
Thanks, Chair. I have no questions, but I'll just move the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilor Grice. So we have moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I would call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes. Moving on to H3, 2022 election officer appointments. Again, there was a report attached, but I will hand it over to the corporate officer for discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair Mattis. This report is for the 2022 election officer appointments, which is required by council to appoint the chief election officer and the deputy chief election officer. I've provided some key dates as part of my background. The recommendation that's before council is that council appoint Rochelle Lougheed as the chief election officer and Diane Vakovich as the deputy chief election officer for the 2022 general election. Part of that reasoning is succession planning and enabling Rochelle to get her both feet into the upcoming general election, and I'll be there to help guide her. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from staff or for staff rather?
I'll move the proposed motion.
Thank you, Councillor Grice, seconded by Mayor Johansson. No further discussion. Hearing none, is there anyone that is opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes, and congratulations to Rochelle. We're now going to move into public question period, but before we go there, I just wanted to, in the original agenda, there was a report on walkability, which I asked to be taken off the agenda. I'm not a big fan of Zoom meetings because they are just information sharing as opposed to true discussion. I felt that this is our number one priority, was the walkability in town. We haven't taken a lot of action in this area over the last 3 years of our term, and we have one last kick at the cat to actually do something. So I thought it would be best to save it for a meeting where we are actually all together and can have proper discussion. Just wanted to let everyone know what transpired in that. I don't believe we have any public at our meeting.
Through the chair, we do have 2 attendees. They haven't raised their hands that they want to speak, but we do.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I would ask if there are any questions from the public at this time. If so, please hit the raise your hand button or unmute and speak up. Hearing none, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Mayor Johansson. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, we are adjourned, and I'll see you all at our regular meeting.
Thank you.